Well, President Trump, we know, will face a Democratic challenger for the White House in 2020.
But could he face a challenger from within his own party? New Hampshire's former GOP chairwoman says yes, and joining us tonight is Jennifer Horn. Jennifer, in an interview with New York Magazine, you said it is inevitable that President Trump will face a Republican primary challenger. Why do you think that?
Well, it does seem as though it's nearly inevitable that he will see a primary challenge, from within his own party. And you could spend 20 minutes talking about the reasons why, unfortunately. This has certainly been one of the most disruptive 2 years of a presidency, certainly in my lifetime, in my adult lifetime. I think you could go through a list of issues with the president, but I think the biggest one that really disturbs Republicans the most is the sense that President Trump has that he's personally and as president above the law, that somehow he is not accountable to this. And the whole idea of that is so contrary to what our founding fathers believed, to what we have laid out in the Constitution, and to our core values as Republicans.
You certainly see a lot of Republicans recoiling when he says the kinds of things he said about Attorney General Jeff Sessions today.
Right.
He said we don't
have an Attorney General.
Exactly.
He seems to want him to act as his personal attorney as opposed to upholding the Constitution. You are a Republican, but like a lot of New England Republicans, you don't go right down the party line. You support gay marriage, for instance.
I do.
Do you want to see the president challenged?
I think it's an important conversation for us to have as a party and as a nation. I think that a primary, the conversation that brings forward would be very productive for us, again, as a party and as a country. Very recently, just a few weeks ago, there was a poll taken in New Hampshire by NH Journal that showed that 47% of New Hampshire Republicans think it would be a good thing for President Trump to see a primary. I think that in New Hampshire, with our first-in-the-nation primary tradition and the experience that Granite State voters have, I think that New Hampshire voters are uniquely qualified to moderate that conversation.
Whom do you envision as a potential challenger to President Trump, someone that could be credible as a challenger?
Right. Well, obviously, that's the most important thing, is that it has to be someone credible. I honestly don't have a particular person that I'm hoping will run. We've seen Senator Ben Sasse has certainly been vocal and conservative and consistent
of Nebraska.
Of Nebraska in the manner in which he holds the president accountable. Senator Jeff Flake has also been really out there having this conversation. Senator Flake, when he was in New Hampshire earlier this year for a Politics and Eggs, not only was the room packed, he got a standing ovation.
It raised a lot of eyebrows that he was there.
Raised a lot of eyebrows that he was there. So I think these are all signs that Republicans are thinking, at least, that maybe this is a good conversation for us to have.
It is going to be interesting to see who turns up in New Hampshire over the next 9 to 18 months. But let's talk about a primary challenge. This hasn't happened in recent memory. And, all we heard in the run-up to 2016 was it was the most qualified group of Republicans ever to run, governors, senators. And Donald Trump, with zero political experience, having never held any office, not even dog catcher, as they say, went right through every single one of them. Sure. So how do you think the party would handle this? As you say, he's helped them raise a tremendous amount of money.
Absolutely. And to one of the points you made just a second ago, it is not at all unprecedented that an incumbent president would have a primary. We can look at Lyndon Johnson had a primary. Gerald Ford had a primary. The first time Ronald Reagan ran for president, it was primarying an incumbent Republican president. H.W. Bush had a primary from Pat Buchanan. I think that there are times that call for that, and so it's not unprecedented. As for how the party would handle it, the party is supposed to be neutral in a primary. The party gets put in a difficult position when this happens, because they're supposed to be neutral in the primary, but they're also there to defend and lift up elected Republicans or elected Democrats, depending on the party. So I believe that the people at the RNC have a tremendous amount of integrity, and that they would manage this process, in a dignified and honorable way.
Overall, President Trump is not terribly popular. He's at about 40% approval. If you look at the averages of the polls, 53% of the country disapproving. But that number really changes when you look specifically at Republicans. The most recent Gallup poll has 88% of Republicans approving of Mr. Trump's presidency. So how much strength at this point does the president's base still have? We talk a lot about the Trump base. And is it possible to beat him in a primary when he is that strong within his own party?
Sure. Well, first of all, of course it's possible. You know, I've all my 10 or more years in politics, there's nobody who is truly unbeatable. But this is a unique situation. And what I do believe is that when folks are polled right now and you ask them, you know, do you support the president? We're in the first 2 years of his presidency. We're still in that mindset as a party, you know, where when you say to someone, do you support the president, their answer is, well, who's I going to vote for, Hillary Clinton? And of course, there's not a Republican out there who's going to say, gee, Hillary Clinton would have been a better choice. So I think when we get past the midterms and people, you know, kind of are in the mindset now of looking forward to 2020 and what does, you know, who are my choices? I think when you give Republicans a choice that's other than Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton at that point, I think then that conversation starts to shift a little bit.
And open up some people who once considered themselves never Trumpers, as they say. Right. Jennifer Horn, former chair of the New Hampshire GOP, thanks for coming in tonight.
Thank you very much for having me.
That's fantastic. That was wonderful. Thank you very much. Eric.